And then we'll come back to staff reports and committee reports. Okay. And we have all our staff reports already, so I will just ask if there are any questions.
Okay, we are now on YouTube.
John's iPhone.
Hello.
There's Tom coming in now.
Come on here. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
I'm reading this.
I'm saying that the next council meeting be held in person at the community center. For those in the administration or on council, if we can safely attend. How's that? We can social distance there, and it's our belief the group numbers will be increased to 10 by then. We have major issues that may be best served for those who are able in that format.
No.
I think we'll go to 10. And then I'm going to say I have some issues of identifiable individuals which need to be held in private session because I hope we're able to meet in person, even if we distance ourselves if possible. Some private there. How's that? Is that okay? Perfect.
Just let me know when you want me to start, Chris.
Nope. Illegal. We're too early.
Yeah, Lisa, we have a few minutes before we actually convene, and then once we do, the mayor is going to go to you next, okay?
Sounds good.
And I forwarded Lisa's presentation to Dan and to Carl for our record.
Thank you. Oh, good. Okay. When you want to talk, how do you want to do that? Okay. 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 Yep. So I'll do all the staff reports and then you can cut in or do whatever you want. Okay. Not a problem. Techno genius that I am. Right. You know, normally if we were here in council, everybody be talking and then you have to actually say, stop. Yeah, I know. You'd have to stop. Got to start. It's so different. I hate this.
All right, Mr. Mayor, we're live on YouTube if you want to go ahead and start now.
Okay, mine says 6:20. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. And to open the meeting, I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we're going to rearrange the agenda. So we're going to go to number 5, which will be a presentation by Lisa McLennan for ACOM regarding current state of landfills. So Lisa, I'll let you take over, and everybody, Lisa McLennan, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just start by sharing my screen. You can just let me know if everybody can see the presentation.
Nice picture.
Thank you. So everyone can see that. Can you hear me okay as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the Township of Nipissing and the council for
Hi,
having.
Lisa. Sorry to interrupt. Can you go to presentation mode? Or slideshow? There you
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
No problem. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, I'm just having some technical difficulties here. Marie, if I do that, I can't see my notes anymore.
Understood, but okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Lisa, if you don't mind, if you just stop sharing for a moment and I'll talk you through it on Teams.
Okay. Let's stop sharing. My apologies. I'm not very familiar with Zoom. This is my first time using it, so.
Remind me to tell you my story about how we had this echo on YouTube for days. Our first one.
Oh, okay. I won't feel so bad then.
No, it happens to everybody. We're all learning.
Lisa, if you send me the presentation, I can share it and you just tell me when to flip slides.
Okay, I actually did send it to you probably about half an hour ago.
Okay,
Do you want
no
me to-
problem. Got it.
Okay.
Sorry about this, guys. That's the PDF, not the PowerPoint, though.
Oh, okay. 1 second.
PDF stand for.
Hey, Tom, can we whiz through some of the other things while they're doing technical difficulty things?
I just,
Well, what we could do, if everybody wants to look over the 3 staff reports, did everybody get staff reports from Road Superintendent McGinnis, John Paul Negrinati, and Chris Croskery-Hodgins, Treasury Deputy Clerk?
Yes.
So does anybody have any questions on any of those?
nope.
Okay, now will send us his report tomorrow in printed form, but he just wanted to add something tonight. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to let council and other staff know that we're going to be searching the landfill and burning the dump. We're going to start with Highway 654 tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And we're going to stay until the landfill attendant gets in at 4. And then we're going to move to 534 on Thursday.
Will, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I think I heard you say you're gonna have a fire at the dump. Is that what you said?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a lot of echo in here tonight. Yeah, we're gonna do 654 on Wednesday at 1 and
Yep.
534 on Thursday at 1.
Okay.
Just in case you guys get any calls.
You got a permit?
Yes, sir. We get to write a permit anytime we feel the it's deemed necessary, and this is necessary due to all the brush that we brought in.
How we doing, Lisa?
Lisa, do you want me to flip through?
I'm just about to get there. It's
Okay.
Marie, sorry. So I think am I sharing, Lisa, now?
Yes, I can see you now.
Okay.
Do you have your, okay. I don't see the presentation up though.
Okay, that's what I asked. Sorry. Where did it go? Too many different things. Can everyone see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Now I can't see my own screen. I can
Well,
only see yours.
you just minimize the Zoom screen and go off the PowerPoint that you have.
Minimize the Zoom screen. Okay. How do I do that?
Oh, we got rid of all the staff reports.
You can press escape, Lisa, and that should help.
Exit full screen.
Yeah, exit full screen.
Okay. Okay. My apologies again. So I'll start from the top. Thanks, Marie. Thanks for your patience. So good evening, everyone. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the Township of Nipissing and the council members for having AECOM present today on the Wolf Lake and Bear Creek landfills. The purpose of this presentation is to provide some information on waste management in Ontario, but more importantly, provide an overview of the current status of the landfills to provide insight on what the road ahead looks like when it comes to waste management for the township. Next slide, please, Marie. So the agenda today will cover introductions, followed by a brief health and safety moment. We will then discuss waste management framework in Ontario and regulatory landfill requirements. We will provide a current township waste diversion programs, and then we will have discussions and overview of the Bear Creek and Wolf Lake landfills, followed by our recommendations for change for implementation in 2020, followed by our summary. So for introductions, my name is Lisa McLennan. I've been working with AECOM for 15 years, with the majority of that time in waste management. I've also been working with the township on their landfills for a number of years, where I started out conducting the environmental monitoring and moving ahead into project management. So Marie Wardman is AECOM's operations lead for Canada, and she is here, obviously, helping me with this presentation this evening. Next slide, please. So for a health and safety moment today, I wanted to provide this information on COVID-19 and vehicle hygiene. This slide describes the process of cleaning vehicle surfaces. And in the diagrams provided, you can see the different contact areas or touch points identified. This process will apply to all drivers, and it also includes cleaning after refueling, etc. So I think this is a really good slide, and it gives a perspective on how many areas within our vehicles can be impacted and how critical it is to use decontamination procedures provided. Next slide, please, Marie. So I'll describe some information on the waste management framework in Ontario. So why waste diversion? Some waste can be used as a resource, for example, food waste. Waste diversion also saves space in landfills. It's economically viable, and it also reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Waste reduction reduces the amount of municipal solid waste ending up in landfill by incorporating the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Next slide, please, Marie. So there's an extended producer responsibility, or EPR, and product stewardship within Ontario. These are federal and provincial EPR programs in place to identify product management life cycle, moving from a linear waste management system, so make, use, dispose, to a closed recovery loop, or otherwise known as circular economy. This is done through incorporating waste reduction, recovery, recycling, and reuse. There's a governing document entitled Strategy for Waste-Free Ontario, Building the Circular Economy. And within this document, there are incentives and platforms in place for the planned transition from product stewardship to full EPR programs, which include transition timelines from 2019 and beyond. So how do we achieve a circular economy? Basically through culture change. So producers will have incentives to produce longer lasting products that are easier to repair, can be reduced, reused, manufactured, or recycled. Municipalities need to be strong leaders in implementing change and promoting resource recovery through policy change, public education, and awareness programs. The public will also need to recognize the value in the materials they consume and shift their lifestyle choices. Next slide, please. So when do we need to achieve a circular economy? Right now, there's actually also already been amended regulations for the 3 Rs, which was implemented in 2019. Ontario's 2020 diversion rate goal is 30%, with goals of 50% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. There's a designation of additional items under the EPR, including mattresses, carpets, and furniture. There's a plan for Ontario to implement disposal bans in 2021 on materials that are currently included in existing waste diversion programs. There's also a possibility for food waste disposal ban in 2022 under the Waste-Free Ontario strategy. Next slide, please, Marie. So what is the importance of landfill capacity in Ontario? There is a garbage crisis on the horizon in our province and in our country. Ontario still sends millions of tons of waste annually to the US. The Waste-Free Ontario strategy anticipates that the majority of the existing landfills in Ontario will have no capacity remaining within 14 years or less. The volume of waste we generate as Ontarians is increasing, but there's little to no change in diversion rates. So is population increasing? No, we are not recycling as effectively as we could. Also, the producers have yet to be required to use packaging materials that can be cost effectively recycled. So in Ontario, we need to look at the cradle to grave mentality. It should be noted that development of a new landfill in Ontario could take up to 10 years and is also extremely costly and may not make it through the approvals process in the end. So the lingering question which can't be avoided is, what will happen to our waste when we have no landfill space left? This is where municipalities need to start looking ahead and developing long-term waste management plans. Next slide, please. So what are some of the regulatory landfill site requirements? All landfills in Ontario are governed by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, or the MECP, under an Environmental Compliance Approval, or ECA. Each landfill site has a separate ECA where there's legal obligations to meet various environmental and operational conditions. These include environmental monitoring programs, landfill capacity, waste footprint areas, landfill cover requirements, etc. This is a working document to be updated throughout the life cycle of a landfill. Any changes will require ministry approval through an ECA amendment application process, which includes a fee, which can range from an administrative fee of $400 for minor changes to between $12,000 and $25,000 if the application requires a fundamental review. So depending on the proposed changes, additional site investigations may also be required and could be very costly. And these include geological investigations and additional monitoring programs. So there are various reporting requirements under the ECA. These include a design and operations report, which provides the development and operation requirements for each landfill site. There's also an annual monitoring report, which is submitted to the ministry and summarizes site operations and environmental assessment findings each year, including groundwater and surface water quality results, waste amounts, and remaining lifespan calculations, etc. There's also a closure report that is required for each landfill. It's prepared and submitted to the ministry, typically 2 years prior to when the site is slated for closure. This document includes requirements for closure and post-closure activities. Next slide, please. The ministry also conducts site inspections on a routine basis for all landfills in Ontario. So the ministry conducts site inspections where they will review the site conditions, operations, and environmental monitoring requirements in accordance with the conditions of the ECA. Following an inspection, the ministry will typically issue an inspection report with action items and recommendations to be addressed by a specific date. If the non-compliance is significant, the ministry may issue a provincial order, director's order, or give fines for non-compliance if certain conditions are not being met. So some examples of non-compliance include fill beyond approved limits, uncovered waste, no cover material, missing signage, unapproved items, or unsecured monitoring wells. Should the ministry find that a site is not in compliance, they will return on a regular basis and may be less lenient for any infractions they see. Fortunately, the Nipissing landfills have not been inspected by the ministry in several years. However, it is inevitable that they will inspect the sites at some time in the near future. Next slide, please. So the current township waste diversion programs include recycling programs at both landfill sites, and the following materials are included: white goods, steel, paper and cardboard, aluminum, tin, and select plastics. Also, there's end-of-life electronics, which is managed by Ontario Electronic Stewardship, and textiles recycling. In 2013, the township implemented a clear bag policy at both landfills to encourage recycling and increase waste diversion. However, when we look at the recycling tonnages for both sites, we do see a decreasing trend year over year since 2014. It was estimated in 2019 that 164 tons of recyclables, or 82 tons per site, were diverted. This provides an estimated diversion rate of approximately 12 to 13%, which is considered very low. Next slide, please. So I'll provide an overview of the current conditions at the Bear Creek landfill site. So the site is approved under their ECA for a total design capacity of 40,000 cubic meters within a waste footprint of 1.1 hectares and a total site area of 40 hectares. The footprint area is established for waste filling and cannot be changed, as this is what is approved in the ACA based on the 2009 Design and Operations Report. Based on the results of the 2019 survey, 585 cubic meters of waste was disposed of at the Bear Creek landfill. This provided an estimated remaining capacity of 17,009 cubic meters, or 37 years life remaining, using the average consumption rate of 457 cubic meters per year. It's really important to understand that consumption rates are conservative and are based on average fill rates surveyed over the previous 5 years. Consumption rates can change due to increase in population, decrease in diversion, and operations such as application of daily cover and compaction activities. As you can see here, the annual consumption rates were very different year over year. For example, in 2015, 390, 2016, it was 385, 2017, it was 790, and in 2018, it was 150. And so in the case of 2018, the waste survey was completed after compaction activities. So it does go to show how much these rates can be impacted, and especially how compaction affects volume. If we use the 2019 rate of 585 cubic meters, as it was higher than the average, this would result in an estimated remaining lifespan of 29 years from 2019. So for example, closure would be in 2048. If there's no change to the operations and the Bear Creek landfill site operates as is, it is estimated that maybe only half life would be available for filling, which would result in 18.5 years capacity remaining. Again, any changes to the design capacity would require a full hydrogeological assessment of the site, which would include increases to the monitoring program and ministry approval through an ECA amendment application process. Again, it would be costly and there's no guarantee approval would be granted. There's also site conditions, which include surface water features to the southeast and extensive wetlands to the east and north. And in addition, a minimum of 30-meter buffer around the waste footprint must be maintained. This would be challenging for the approvals process without having significant engineering controls in place, such as leachate collection system liners. Next slide, please. So once the Bear Creek landfill reaches closure, waste will need to be diverted from there to the Wolf Lake landfill. Oh, I think I included something additional here. So that's something important to note for sure. So I have a diagram. Next slide, please, Marie. Sorry. We have a diagram here of the Bear Creek landfill site, and it's my understanding that there was a site visit today with council. I'm not sure if you all were able to attend, but we have the diagram here, which shows the approved waste footprint area and the buffer area. And you'll see a dotted green area. That is the current filling area. And as you can see, it goes beyond into the kind of peach colored area. And that's actually where the fill beyond approved limits is currently. So that waste is not able to be placed there and has to be moved back into the footprint. Next slide, please. So now I'll go over the Wolf Lake landfill current site conditions. So this site is approved in the ACA for a total design capacity of 54,770 cubic meters within a waste footprint of 1.2 hectares and a total site size of 17 hectares. Based on results of the 2019 survey, 575 cubic meters of waste was disposed of at the Wolf Lake landfill, which provided an estimated remaining lifespan of 43,305 cubic meters, or 108 years capacity remaining, using an average consumption rate of 399 cubic meters per year. Again, consumption rates are conservative and are based on average fill rates surveyed over previous 5 years. Again, these can change due to increase in population, decrease in diversion and operations, such as application of daily cover and compaction activities. So for the Wolf Lake landfill, you can see here the annual consumption rates were also very different year over year. 2015, they were 280. 2016, it was 505. 2017 was 387. And 2018 was 220. And again, as you saw with the Bear Creek landfill, Wolf Lake in 2018 had lower rates because the waste survey was completed following compaction activities. So if no change to the operations and the Wolf Lake landfill site operates as is, site life could be much less than 108 years, but must also take into account the additional waste coming in once Bear Creek landfill site is closed. The fill rate at the Wolf Lake landfill would then be doubled. So for comparison purposes, using the 2019 fill rates from Bear Creek landfill at the time of closure, for an example from 2048, this would result in an increase in consumption rate at the Wolf Lake landfill to almost 1,200 cubic meters per year, and a change in the estimated remaining lifespan of 33 years from 2048. So closure anticipated for 2077. This actually amounts to only 58 years remaining capacity at the Wolf Lake landfill from 2019. So not the 108 that is currently estimated. Next slide, please. So here we have a a diagram of the Wolf Lake landfill, and again, the green dotted areas where we're currently filling. So this site actually doesn't have a lot of the same conditions as Bear Creek with the overcropping of the bedrock. So it is a little easier to manage and operate. Next slide, please. So AECOM has provided some recommendations for change for implementation in 2020. This includes development of a cell sequencing fill plan for both landfills. So we have staked out both waste footprints in May 2020 to aid in the development of the landfill sequencing fill plans and then identify any areas of concern. This will help the township in the future management of the landfill sites and result in more efficient operations so that both landfill footprints can be utilized as efficiently as possible. We have also provided recommendations to include potential additional programs to support waste diversion, such as bag limits for residents. For example, 2 bags per vehicle per visit and/or punch cards. We also recommend tipping fee revisions and possible item bans, including tires, shingles, sofas, and mattresses. Next slide, please. So for the waste disposal drop-off areas, we have provided a few recommendations here as well, which include a one-way in and one-way out. So if the site attendant can talk, to each resident and inspect each and every load as required. The site attendant can then direct the public to the appropriate area for material disposal. If an item is inappropriately tipped, then that item should be removed immediately and placed in the appropriate location. If the item is considered unacceptable at the site, then the resident shall remove the item. The site attendant should also provide notice for unacceptable loads or items and keep a record, such as hazardous waste, including paints. This is also a requirement of the ECA. The site attendant shall collect tipping fees for all designated items in accordance with the township policies. Next slide, please. So we do have some recommendations as well for site operational requirements and proposed changes. So most of these items actually are conditions of the ECA, and they are items that could be addressed by the ministry should they come and do a site inspection. So these items include all waste areas should be checked at the end of each operating day to ensure items are in the correct location. For example, no treated wood or glass is in the burn pile, and only metals in the scrap pile should be there. The use of litter fencing around the active area will reduce wind-blown litter and animal activity at the site and helps prevent odors, biodegradation, and overall appearance. Cover material shall be placed over the entire active waste area at the end of each operating week in accordance with the ECA. Compaction of waste is critical in achieving additional space, as I had indicated earlier, and should be completed as much as possible. We recommend a minimum of once per month. Site signage should be improved. Metals recyclables need to be stored in a bin for health and safety reasons. If accepting appliances and white goods, some jurisdictions only allow untagged items to be stored on site for 30 days before requiring removal to avoid leaking or hazardous toxic materials. So more frequent removal should be required or do not accept these items. Also, it should be considered that instead of burning clean brush on sites, these wood waste can be chipped and used as daily cover material, so there was always a supply readily available, or the clean brush can be placed at the toe of the slope of the landfill to aid in operations where there are wet, marshy conditions. Next slide, please. So in summary, although 108 years capacity remaining at the Wolf Lake landfill and 37 years remaining at the Bear Creek landfill sounds great, this is based on the assumption that each site remains in compliance with the governing ECA and does not take into account the major factors, which is changes to the consumption rates. With existing operations, the operational lifespan of each site may be considerably diminished as described. We understand there is a cost associated with change. For the majority of our recommendations, the cost would be minimal when you take into account the current life expectancy of each landfill. The biggest interim costs would be purchasing a compactor, and this could come out of the township's reserve fund for the site closures. It is most important to have the equipment now and create additional space for the future rather than having to close the landfills earlier than anticipated when they become full. Litter fencing is also required, or not required, but should be placed around the active area and will prevent windblown litter. So lastly, the importance of having successful waste diversion programs and well-managed landfill sites is a sign of a community that has a strong commitment to change and values to protect the environment for future generations. Next slide, please. So that concludes our presentation today. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we move on, I know a number of councillors may have questions. I want to point out, councillors, that I think Lisa met virtually with Dan and Chris today. Is that correct, this afternoon?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, so I think she gave more clarity than what we had this morning and answered a number of questions. But if you ask your questions now, Dan and Chris may be able to help, as well as Lisa, in answering those questions. So I open the floor for councillors if you have any questions of Lisa.
Well, I'll
okay,
start. Oh. Who's going?
Go ahead, Liz.
go ahead.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm really confused here because, I mean, I thought we were doing our part with recycling. We have talked about limiting the amount of bags, and I know that we aren't taking as many recyclables, not as many things are recyclable anymore. But you're looking at a drastic change here. Like, we thought we were doing well and we had years and years of life, and now you tell us something different. Well, why haven't we heard this sooner? This is for Lisa.
Thanks for your question. So basically, the numbers haven't changed year over year. We continue to use the average consumption rates for the landfills, but recent activities, and we've been able to do some site inspections recently, and we have seen that some of the operations have changed as well. With developing our landfill sequencing plan, we know that there are additional areas that may require operational changes. And so we feel like there's always room for change. If the diversion numbers aren't showing to be improving, then that means that they're not working. Which is why we have, you know, provided those numbers to you so that you can see what will happen years from now.
I'm still confused. It's like the numbers that I see on the report that comes every year looks as though we are in great shape. And now it looks like we're in really bad shape. I don't, and you say we have some operational changes that maybe contributed to this. What do you mean?
Well, the waste diversion, for instance, that would be a change, because we do see as well, if you look at the tonnages, like I said, they are different year over year, but last year they're increasing. So there is more waste going into the site, which does change the numbers.
Well,
Can
I
I
can
just
see
say,
it
sorry,
starting
this
to
is
change.
Linda. Yeah, can I just say
Go
that
ahead.
those numbers went up last year? They did not go down last year. And if it's been year over year, we should have seen a downward trend last year, not this year.
Well, we actually did see a downward trend last year because we did compaction before we actually did the waste surveys. So the numbers,
Okay, I have a question about the compaction as well. Why haven't we been told that that was required on a monthly basis? We've always done it annually. Why would it not have been told to us before that it should be monthly?
well, it has been verbally discussed that compaction and cover requirements are required, but it was my understanding that there may have been budgetary concerns.
It
So
should
it
have been
wasn't-
in writing. We're paying you to do the report. It should have been in writing for us. We've never heard that before, that it should be monthly. We've only ever heard it was annual.
Okay, I was never, I could have provided that in a report. I was never asked to, and would normally not put that in our report for the ministry, but
Well, why did you put it in this year then? That doesn't make sense. There's a lot of missing loopholes here. I just don't, I'm like Liz, I don't understand how we got here today. Like, I don't understand that.
nothing's different in the reports that we have provided. We're just showing a different perspective of what happens if we continue to go the route we have. And so
Lisa, I'm happy to provide a comment here. It's Marie. I think one of the things we're aware of is that you have significant fluctuation in your capacity based on survey year after year, which tells us that there is variability, considerable variability in the amount of waste you're accepting at the landfills, which is unusual. If there hasn't been a significant population change up or down, then there wouldn't be anticipated to be that much fluctuation. And aside from the 2018 numbers that show that when compaction was done, that it's obviously working, the other number to look at is the fact that from a recyclables perspective, your diversion rates are going down, and that is of concern. From the ministry's perspective, in our annual reports, we're required to report on the compliance as it pertains to whether you're within your footprint, what remaining capacity you have, and also whether you're in compliance from an environmental perspective, from the groundwater and the surface water perspective. This year, when we were asked to provide this presentation, it was because we had already noted to the township during our previous visits to the site that there had been some operational changes that were slightly concerning, but also that we had recommended previously that compaction would be a good idea to maintain the capacity of the life and the life of the landfill. But it's not a requirement. It was just our recommendation to allow you to have a longer lifespan. What is unusual for both of these sites is the actual lifespan. It is, for Wolf in particular, 108 years is exceptionally long. It's typically only viewed for smaller sites that you'd have about 40 years worth of life, because the challenge with the lifespan extending beyond 40 years is that environmental considerations change, regulations change, and therefore what was previously approved would require significant upgrade or additional engineering items that would cost the township more. So I think what Lisa was hoping to present to you was that this is not necessarily a turning point, but this is an opportunity for the township to look at their current operations and where they may be able to gain further capacity, because the amount of waste that is being brought into the landfill is variable, and even with the implementation of clear bags, it appears that the residents may not be diverting plastics or recyclables out of those clear waste bags.
Okay, so you mentioned the operational changes again. Can you clarify what those exactly are? Because I'm not getting a clear picture. In 1 year, what have we changed that is making this big of a difference?
It's not necessarily 1 year of changes. It's just that, for example, as Lisa outlined for Bear, there's fill beyond the allowable limits.
So it's not operational then.
That is operational.
So that's the operational change, is that we went outside the barrier.
Yes, and so when that happens, if the ministry were to inspect the site rather, the challenge is that when they issued the ECA, they are saying you shall do it within these parameters. As soon as you go outside of those parameters, they, as Lisa indicated, you become on their radar, and they will scrutinize the sites, and every opportunity to require additional operational improvements will be in their inspection and action reports. And that is the concern, that we want to make sure that some of the operational things that have happened over the last few years need to be just recorrected. And it's not a huge deal to put these changes in place, but now is the time to do it.
Well, first of all, especially at the 654 landfill, I mean, for at least 2 years now, we've taken all household waste and we are diverted. It all goes to the Wolf Lake site. So that should have helped this. And we've been pretty diligent in that. And for how long have you guys known that we have gone outside of the perimeters at the 654 landfill? Because this is new to me.
Lisa, my understanding is that it was from the survey this year that was identified.
It was actually identified prior to the survey, but the survey confirmed that was the case. I did discuss with Dave last year that it appeared they were getting pretty close to the edge, and that they shouldn't be filling anymore until we completed the survey. So when we actually did the survey, we saw how extensive it was.
Was that
Do you
in our
survey
annual
it?
report last year?
That
Pardon
was
me?
from last year's. That was from the 2019 survey. We survey every year.
So was that in last year's report then, is what I meant, sorry.
Yes, it was actually. It was addressed that there was fill beyond the approved limits, and that it would just be moved back into the footprint this year.
We didn't do anything about that last year, is that correct?
Right, that's correct.
Sorry. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
And I think I should just mention that operational changes are more of what we're recommending now, not necessarily what's been going on in the past, other than that fill beyond approved limits. It's just revamping those operations so that we're achieving more space within the landfills because of how important it is to have that space.
Yeah, may I say something now, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yeah, last year we stopped recycling glass and plastic. I'm not sure, I can't remember what month, but glass creates quite a volume. And I think the compaction should be done more regularly, because if you get 2 or 3 feet of garbage, the bottom is not going to break because it's going to be cushioned. And then with the plastics, not except we're getting a lot more material. Plus this year, we better be concerned that with no tipping fees being charged during the COVID, a lot of people are hauling a lot more loads in, I would suspect. So we should be aware of that. But I think, the glass has probably been one of the big problems because it is very bulky. Thank you.
May I say something about the tipping fees?
Yes.
Councillor Martin, we are charging tipping fees as we normally do for our larger items. We are actually going to bill them out when we send out our final bills. So we are keeping track of the larger loads that are coming in, and we will be billing that out. So we do have invoices ready for the people.
Okay, I just heard some people that thought it was free.
Brush was free during the burning ban, but we are still charging for large bulk items as we state in our user fee bylaw.
I hope so.
Chris, just a question, does that include couches and furniture, those bulk items?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, if you stop people from bringing mattresses and sofas to the landfill, where do they go with it? Because in past practices from where I've worked, when you tell people they can't go, you just end up picking it up at some dead end or on the end of on the side of the road. You can't tell people not to bring this stuff, or at least give them another spot to take it.
we are in discussions with the city of North Bay for their program, and hopefully we can work with them for a mattress diversion program. That's in the very beginning.
That's mattresses. What about your sofas and couches?
That I don't know.
See,
That's a great idea
if
though,
we-
Chris. Sorry.
but like same with like, because we're a rural community and our population grows a lot in the summer, we have a lot of people from the south bringing their garbage up here, and it ends up in our landfill sites instead of down there. So if they buy a new fridge down south, they bring their old fridge up here, and the one in their camp comes to our landfill. How do you combat this? Like, how do you stop this? How do you make them say you got to take it back to where it wants to come from?
One option is, rather than to refuse it, is to look at your tipping fees that pertain to those particular items to make sure they cover the cost that you will incur to have it removed from the site, rather than leaving it to the resident or the summer resident to haul it off and then unfortunately dump it somewhere else. And that is it's finding the right balance of what that fee is, so that it's not a cost incurred to the township overall when you have a collection of mattresses or furniture in general to be able to move it and transport it to the appropriate place for disposal. Or you have to look at education in general of the residents of what is accepted at the site, or you need to look at what it means to reduce your capacity if you're going to actually put it in the landfill itself.
And how much would it cost us to have our landfills enlarged? When these things were built, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, the population was nowhere the same as it is now. Is there any way that we could expand any of these, and how much roughly would it cost?
From an expansion perspective for Wolf, with 108 years of capacity or even 50 years of capacity, the ministry probably would not entertain the concept of going for an expansion, because your approved waste capacity is over 40,000 cubic meters to begin with. If you do want to go down that route, likely it would be exceptionally costly in that you would need a scoped EA, an environmental assessment, and as Lisa indicated, a full hydro-G assessment. But it also may require you to have engineered components at the landfill, which is not feasible in a rural setting, because the ministry will want you to be able to demonstrate that there will be no environmental impact at your property boundary whatsoever, whether it be on groundwater or surface water. And based on the site footprint at Wolf being 1.1 hectares, I believe, within a 17-hectare site, the contaminant attenuation zone beyond the buffer limit wouldn't be sufficient. You would need to gain more property. For Bear, the capacity is 40,000 cubic meters. You could undergo an amendment application to request another 40,000 cubic meters. You would have to demonstrate that you need that capacity urgently and that it would last you for at least another 25 years. Because you already have Wolf with 108, or even let's say half of that, 50, 60, I can do math today.
54.
I can't. 54, sorry, thank you. With 54 years worth of life, they would just say, why do you need an expansion at Bear if you've got 54 years worth of life at Wolf? That doesn't make any sense. And because things will obviously change over every 5 years or so as to the regulatory requirements and also the improvements that can be made from an engineering perspective, it's unlikely you would get through the approvals process. For Wolf, if you did choose to go down the scoped environmental assessment process, it starts at about $250,000. And that's just to do the studies. There's no guarantee of approvals. And
So
for Bear,
250,000, you could buy a compactor.
yes,
Yeah.
That would extend the life approximately the same amount.
potentially, yes, assuming that there isn't an increase in the amount of uncompacted waste that's being brought in. If the population were to change significantly in 5-10 years from now, then that will obviously have an impact of the remaining capacity of both of the sites.
Thank you, Marie.
No problem.
Any other questions? I think especially for James and Linda, they were with me today on our Enfield tour. Since then, Dan and Chris have a report that they'll be able to share with us from their conference with Lisa today that may shed a little more light on things. Definitely, we had a lot of questions this morning, but I think you've addressed most of those. Again, my question was, how did we get outside of the footprint at Bear? And you said it was suggested a year ago. And I would just, while we have this opportunity, I'd like to really thank our road superintendent McGinnis for bringing us up to speed on this today. We always try to support our workers, and I'm glad he brought it to our attention, and that hopefully we can take some concrete steps in improving what seems to have gotten away on us, whether it be a lack of recycling or outside of the footprint, or a lack of compaction, anything like that. Hopefully this meeting tonight will shed some light so that we can make the improvements that you've recommended and that Chris and Dan will be able to share with us. Now, does anybody else have any other questions? If not, I will thank Marie and Lisa for the time they put in tonight. And I hope we can put you on our speed dial if we have more questions as we go forward. And otherwise, I again thank you for the time you did tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye for now.
Thank you.
So as we move on, I've written down here, I'm requesting that the next council meeting be held in person at the community center for those in administration and council who are able or safely attend. We can social distance there, and I think it's our belief that group numbers will be increased to 10 by then. And we have some major issues that I find so difficult to discuss in this format. And I'd really like us to try to get together and work through this. Chris and Dan will be making this presentation from Lisa with us today, but we're looking at everything now. We have to look at a lot of options, and I guess the first one being we need to recycle much, much better than we have at 13 to 15%. And evidently compaction once a year isn't working. And she pointed out a few other things that we haven't been doing that we're going to have to do. And we've been lucky, the ministry hasn't been in to check us yet. So if possible, and if we get to 10 people, perhaps we can entertain that for the next meeting. But we'll be in touch in the meantime about that. And only if you feel safe. If you don't, then we'll continue, for those people, continue to, you know, go on camera. So I'm just going to leave that with you now. And we're going to go back to our regular programming. But in the meantime, we have some major questions here that we're going to have to look at in the very near future. Any comments or questions before we move on? Okay, I think, and we have looked at all the staff reports. So what we will do is we'll move on to committee reports. And we'll start with Liz Moore, please.
Okay, I just got an email in today that the Powassan Public Library, they are starting their phase 1 of opening. And what that means is you can order your books online or phone. Then you make an appointment and you go and you pick them up at the front door. Somebody will be there at your appointment time. There'll also be a drop-off bin outside the door to drop your books off. And again, that's by appointment only, and it'll only be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 11 a.m. till 3 p.m. They will still offer the Wi-Fi, but that will be outside, so you can sit in the parking lot and use their Wi-Fi. And their programming, they have a couple of, like the Raising Readers and the Toddler Time, that is still online for anybody that wants to access that through the library. And I've also been advised that one of our library clerks, Sandy Rumford, will be retiring. So that will be in the very near future. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Moore?
When the books are dropped in, will they leave them in the box for a couple days, like some areas?
They didn't describe what they will do, but they did say that all of the protocols were in place. So whatever they've been asked to do, they will be doing them. So.
Yeah, good.
Okay, in that case, we'll move on to Councillor Marchant.
I haven't had any committees. Have one on this Thursday for the planning board, the virtual meeting. And then we'll be deciding when we can do consents again. So this Thursday.
Good, thank you. Councillor Anderson?
I don't have any committee meetings to report on.
And the other group, the non-council group that you're on? Do you see anything coming there in the near future?
The advisory committee
Yes.
for the rural and Northern Ontario tourism has finished their draft report, which was submitted to the ministry. It'll come back to the committee, which we'll be meeting about, I think, at the end of this week. The final report has to be in on the 24th. But I think that they've come up with some some options for the government to consider when they are doing the reopen. And I believe that the reopen for that sector is in phase 2, not in phase 1, which is what we started today. So I think that we should be hearing rumblings about getting ready, similar to how they did it before. And I will expect that to be in the next 2 weeks.
Good, thank you. Councillor Scott?
I haven't had any committee reports or any committee meetings.
Okay, well, thank you. I haven't been quite as fortunate, and I'll try to face you. I know everybody has listened to the news, and as of last night, May 18th, East Home had a positive COVID-19 test. It was a staff member who is now in quarantine at home, not in the hospital. No resident has tested positive, but the health unit has closed the home for 2 weeks. All health unit guidelines are being continued, and there will be more testing in the future. A lot of people have asked who the staff members' identity or the staff members' identity. Neither the East Home or the health unit will disclose it because it's a privacy issue, but I have been called by a number of people in town of Powassan because it's causing plenty of local anxiety. But there will be upgraded reports on that, but they will all come from the health unit at their leisure. So we'll just have to wait and see. The other thing I was mentioning, the Sturgeon Nipissing French River, the lake has only risen 3 inches in 10 days. It's reached the minimum navigation level. Water authority has said the freshet is controlled out of the north at this time, but some lakes still have ice. Some cases log-in operations have begun, so that means they're cutting back flow to fill other areas. And they want to reach the maximum navigation level in case it is a dry summer. As a result, water will continue to rise slowly. Other than that, I have an East Home meeting tomorrow. And like I said, all I know today is basically what we all heard on the radio or the TV this afternoon. And again, I don't know, but I just wanted to thank the road superintendent, because without our leadership, without his leadership, our landfill situation would be more dire than it is. So if you're still on there, Dan, thank you. And
Thanks, man.
we've got our work cut out for us, but we've got a good spot to start and good people doing the job. So now I will move on, if there are no questions, to
I have one question, Tom.
adopt the minutes of the meeting held May 5th.
I have a
So-
question for you, Tom.
Yes,
I just wanted to know, because you're on the East Home board, was last week the first time that they actually tested everybody at East Home and
yes.
other surrounding nursing homes? Was there any reason for
Yes.
that? Why they didn't do it earlier?
It started in the south and moved north. North Bay was all tested a week ago Friday. I knew they were in North Bay at Water's Edge. They did Castle Home. And then this past week, they went into East Home and Nipissing Manor. So I'm not sure why it was. Well, I do know they started in private homes and they started there earlier. And they started in the south.
Okay.
And then their teams moved north.
And so they had teams that would just come up here and do the testing.
Yes.
Is that what they did? So
Yes.
our health unit didn't do the testing itself. Okay.
And I don't believe so. But again, that's a good question. I will ask for a confirmation on that tomorrow, but good question, Liz. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Okay, so for the minutes from last week's meeting, I need a mover, somebody to move it, please.
Linda,
James,
You. Yep. Okay, moved by Counselor Anderson. And seconded by Counselor Marchant. That the minutes of the meeting held May 5th, 2020 be adopted as published. For
I
or
take that.
against, Counselor Scott?
Yep.
For?
Yep.
Okay, Moore,
4.
4.
Marchant,
Or
Anderson,
4.
and Piper is 4. And I will just sign. We'll go to resolution number 6 to accept a quote for the walkway installation at the Nipissing Township Museum. We ended up with 2 quotes. And I can read them out, right? The one quote was from Evergreen Landscaping and Calendar. Their quote was $3,559.50. And today we received a revised quote. Councillor Anderson and Councillor Moore will appreciate this. This is a revised quote from Mike Young, Property Maintenance. And the new quote came in at $2,485.32. So it's our recommendation that we take the Mike Young, the lower quote, at $24.85.32.
Does that include the
Any-
patio stones, or do we have to pay extra for that?
Okay, the question, does that include, that's the stone dust? That includes the stone dust.
But not the actual stones, so we have to pay $1,500 for that?
No, that includes the actual brick as well.
Okay,
Oh,
And the brick
good.
is $639.
really? Well, that is a good number.
It is a
It
great number.
certainly
It's
is.
$639.40.
Yep,
So
Good to hear.
I need a mover and a seconder. This is number R 2020-103. So moved by,
Liz,
James,
okay, Councillor Moore, seconded by
Linda,
Mr. Scott,
Councillor Anderson, that we approve the quote for the installation of the walkway at the Nipissing Township Museum received from Mike Young Property Maintenance totaling $2,485.32, including applicable taxes. For or against, Scott?
4.
Thank you. Moore?
4.
Marchant?
4.
Anderson?
4.
And I am, of course, for it because it's such a good deal. We'll move on to resolution 7. This is the resolution for operations superintendent and the CAO clerk to sign an agreement. So the Electronic Producers Recycling Association. So that's our agreement with them. So it's number R 2020-104. I need a mover. Was that Councillor
Mr.
Scott? Okay,
Yep.
Scott and Councillor Marchant. That we authorize the CAO clerk and operations superintendent to sign an agreement with the Electronic Producers Recycling Association For or against? Scott? Are you for,
For.
James?
For.
Thank you. Moore?
For.
Or
Gotcha. Marchant?
For.
Anderson?
For,
And I am for as well. So they can go on and sign that contract. The next one. The next one is a mandatory ministry requirement, okay? It's number R 2020-105. I need a mover, please.
Liz,
Thank you. And a seconder.
James.
Okay, that
James.
was James. Scott, thank you.
I did have one little
And,
question on it.
Okay,
And maybe Chris knows it. Chris, the parental leave for parents, I get that, but does that include a grandparent with all of the changes that are going on today where grandparents are taking custody of grandchildren? Would that apply to them?
That's not what they specifically asked for with this regulation. But
Okay.
I'm sure that council can add to this leave in any way that they choose.
So we could have,
Just for
okay,
the
I get
members.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, good enough.
okay, so I'll move on, so it's number R 2020-105, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Scott, that we pass bylaw number 2020-24, being a bylaw to adopt a pregnancy leaves and parental leaves of members of council policy, read a first, second, and third time and passed this 19th day of May 2020. Again, for or against? Scott?
For.
Moore?
For,
Marchant?
For.
Anderson?
for,
I make it unanimous. Thank you. We move on to correspondence. We've seen just to go over it, the municipality of Whitestone, the resolution regarding public health funding. Everybody is going to be in the same situation. I just hope after COVID-19, there is still public health funding. The second letter was Wade's Landing. The facility has been turned over to us. And the third letter, I think you all received a copy of this originally. And that's over request for service when calcium chloride is applied this year. You've all received it, you've all seen it. Are there any comments or questions? We will entertain these issues when we get to the appropriate time for calcium, and the landing, of course, is done, and we'll look at health funding in the future. So if you have that, there's not a lot of correspondence these days. So it becomes number R 2020-106. Now, is there any questions on any of those? Okay, if not, I need a mover to accept the correspondence.
Are we going to support the one from Whitestone?
The White,
About the health, the resolution, about the North Bay Prairie Sound District Health Unit?
well, I think what we had contemplating was holding off to get more information from the health unit. because right now, nobody seems to know the right numbers or what to expect. So they're asking for more provincial aid when right now the health unit isn't sure what their statistics are going to be either. So,
Well, did we get any correspondence? Because apparently Perry Sound was advised that the following changes in their letter from the third 2575 or 3070, from 100 to 3070. They must have got the figures somewhere.
okay. Yes, we have those. Charles just confirmed. So Tom, do you want to support that?
Well, I think we should get our voice in there. You know, if we're going to end up a 42% increase.
Right, yeah, that was in the budget for this year. So what we'll look at is we'll bring that up as a resolution for next week, or pardon me, next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. So in that case, Councillor Marchant, do you want to move that we accept the correspondence?
Yes.
And seconded by,
Liz,
thank you. So it's number R 2020-106, moved by Councillor Marchant, seconded by Councillor Moore, that we accept the correspondence as presented. For or against, Councillor Scott,
For.
Councillor Moore,
for,
Councillor Marchant,
Or
Councillor Anderson,
for,
and I am for as well. And we go to accounts to pay. I'll just give you a heads up that the statement of accounts dated May 14th, May 17th, and May 19th, 2020, totaling $61,951.61 be approved. So I need a mover and a seconder.
Linda,
Mr. Scott.
Okay. Thank you both. So number R 2020-107, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Scott, that the statement of accounts dated May 14th, 17th, and 19th, 2020, totaling $61,951.61 be approved. For or against, Councillor Scott,
For.
Councillor Moore,
for,
Councillor Marchant,
or
Councillor Anderson,
for,
and I am for as well. So we move to number R 2020-108, and this is the bylaw to confirm proceedings. I need a mover, please.
Liz,
Thank you. The seconder.
Tom.
James.
Okay, I'm going to use you on the next one, James. So number R 2020-108, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Marchant, that we pass bylaw number 2020-25, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on May 19th, 2020, read the first, second, and third time, and passed this 19th day of May, 2020. For or against, Scott,
For.
Moore,
for,
Marchant,
Or
Anderson,
for,
and I am for as well. And to complete the night, and I've mentioned about the possibility of our next meeting, but it's up. We have to see if we have permission for 10 people and to see if everybody's able to do it. But it's our last motion is number R 2020-109. A mover, please. Oh,
Mr.
James.
Scott,
Yes, sorry. I've got a short memory. Seconded by,
Linda,
thank you. So number 2020-109, moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that the meeting be adjourned at 8:38, it says on here, PM. The next regular meeting to be held
It's 7:50,
June
isn't it?
2nd. Okay, my computer isn't firing up the right number here.
No, 7:50 is what it shows on
Nine.
my phone.
Thanks for my computer. Maybe it's on East Coast time.
Yeah.
So that the meeting be adjourned at 7:50 PM. The next regular meeting to be held June 2nd, 2020. For or against? Scott?
for,
Moore?
For.
Marchant?
Or
Anderson?
for,
And myself for. I'd like to thank you all and thank you for your patience tonight. And hopefully we can meet in a different situation in the future. We'll see. We'll discuss that. And just be safe and be careful, and we'll talk soon. And it's hard to believe, but I miss the old council meetings. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
good night.
Good night.
right.